Welcome to another edition of the Gridiron Report, brought to you by Red Raider Outfitter, the fans' favorite since 1975. I'm Jared Johnson. I'm joined by the mighty Joe Yeager. Mighty Joe, man, it's actually it's hot, but it's nice West Texas summer day. We're out here in front of the Jones. Optimism abounds, and you're looking good. You got the fedora going, the shades rocking, the shirt, man. You're looking like you're ready for the beach.
This is two shows in a row that I managed to bullseye on the sartorial stuff, so I'm very pleased with that.
I don't know what sartorial means, but I assume it means like you're dapper. You're looking dapper. You're looking good. Yeah, all right. Mighty Joe with his vocab. Well, speaking of your writing, one of my favorite things we do every year, or you do every year, but one of my favorite things on Inside the Red Raiders is your Critical 20 series, and you just wrapped it up with Tyler Shuck taking the top spot. Before we get to that, the fact that QB1 is number one, your overall thoughts. You've done this, I don't know how many years now, at least like a decade, if not longer, this Critical 20 series. What's your overall thought when you're looking over the talent and the roster as a whole, like you did to do this series?
Do you mean in general, like over time, or do you mean specific to this particular team?
This team compared to in years past.
Right, yeah.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, there is. First off, it's on paper, it's the best team since I've been doing this. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I think the starting lineup all the way across the board is the best it's ever been. I think the depth overall is the best it's ever been. There are a few spots, naturally, where you're kind of concerned. Certain areas in the secondary, and I'm a little bit not worried, but slightly concerned at defensive tackle. The backups, that's one of the reasons that Hutchings and Bradford are so high on this list, is because there's a lot of unproven guys behind them. However, those are very durable players, so that may not be too big of a deal. So, spots, you're a little bit concerned with depth, but overall, it's just a really salty roster.
And can you give those watching who are unfamiliar with the Critical 20 series your methodology, just basically what you look for and how you do it?
It's the most important players on the team from a standpoint of if X player were to go down with an injury for a prolonged period of time, how badly would it hurt the team? And the more badly losing a guy hurts the team, the more important that player is. Basically, is kind of what that is. And so you have to look at depth at that situation, and then you also look at the importance of the position. Quarterback, obviously the most important position on the team. That's going to give whoever the starting quarterback is a huge leg up on being very high in the ranking. And, without having to look back at the past, I would say the starting quarterback has probably been number one.
More times than not.
80%, 90% of the time. Occasionally somebody else will pop back up, but that's usually the way it works out.
Speaking of quarterbacks, you had, like I mentioned, Tyler Shuck was number one, the top spot, but Baron Morton was also in your top 20. It is interesting to just discuss with Baron Morton being a known quantity. Did you give any thought to somebody else being number one, or was it like, no, Shuck's number one on the top spot?
I sure did, and I think anybody out there, if they wanted to challenge me on this and say, man, I don't think Shuck is number one, he should be down a couple of spots, I might not argue with them. I seriously thought about that myself because, I really like Baron Morton, and I think he can come in and do a bang-up job. I think he can probably start for a few teams in the Big 12. He's that good. You could make the case for that, but the problem is if you're not going to have Shuck at number one, then who are you going to put at number one? And there was just nobody else out there that really jumped out at me where I said, this is clearly the guy that's given Shuck a run for the money to be number one. There was just nobody else. there's a bunch of guys that are just kind of all sort of in that area, but outside of Shuck, nobody really stands out as a must-have guy that lost you potentially could be somewhat of a disaster.
I really liked your list and the way you had it ranked this year especially. There's been some times where I thought maybe you were being kind of cheeky, for lack of a better word, just to create discussion, which hey man, I'm all for it. I like it in terms of business. But I thought you didn't mess around this year. Like, this is who it is. I don't know if I wouldn't say it was easy for you, but it was like, these guys are important. And you mentioned Hutchings and Bradford. And I thought them coming back for another year, their super senior season, was maybe at least as important as Shuck coming back. I mean, it's huge to have those two stalwarts, multi-year starters. And I don't know if the layman realizes just how good those two guys are. I mean, like Pro Football Focus mentions, they like switch off saying those two guys are in the top 10 in terms of returning interior defensive linemen in various categories, and just what they do for Texas Tech. How good are they, and just how important are they for the Red Raiders next year?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're talking about a package deal with those two guys versus Shuck coming back, which is more important, then I would definitely go with the DB. I would definitely agree with that. And interior defensive linemen sometimes get lost in the shuffle a little bit. They just don't put up the big stats. It's the DEs, the defensive ends, the edge rushers, the outside linebackers. They're making most of the big plays, and so they get a lot of the credit. But without defensive tackles doing their job, the defense just doesn't work. Nobody's defense. It doesn't matter who your defensive coordinator is, what the scheme is. If the interior defensive linemen can't hold down their you can forget it. The entire defense is compromised.
Yeah.
And those guys are just absolutely rock solid. On top of that, Bradford, I mean, he had 5.5 sacks last year. You kind of, I was surprised when I saw that. I didn't realize, how much of a pass rusher he had been. But I mean, 5.5 sacks for a guy playing that position is pretty dang strong. So those guys are absolutely essential, and then I would throw in the two corners as well.
Yeah.
Dunlap and Rashad Williams. I mean, those are two absolutely critical positions, defensive tackle and cornerback. If you've got those two positions as strengths of your defense, then as a defensive coordinator, man, you're one happy mofro. I mean, there's no doubt about it, because those are hard to find.
Yeah.
Good defensive tackles and good cornerbacks that you can trust and rely on, and veteran players, super seniors, all of them. Man, that gives Texas Tech so much of an advantage on the vast majority of teams in terms of defense.
And they're bringing in depth, some help there via the transfer portal in the secondary. Brandon Lux is a guy who's already signed. There's another guy, it's on inside the Red Raiders from in the conference, who, I'll go ahead and say it, AJ McCarty from Baylor. I definitely expect to be a Red Raider. James Blanchard, Texas' current recruiting coordinator, actually offered him at Baylor. McGuire was a big part of his recruitment to Baylor as well. There was some kind of things, I don't want to get too much into Baylor's business, but obviously McCarty wasn't happy, and he's staying in state. I believe, I've heard this from the player, but I believe he's staying in state and he's going to join Texas Tech. I think he may start at safety. I mean, he's going to challenge Tyler Owens next to Rabbit. He started for Baylor. He had a really good game against Texas Tech last year, so that will help a lot. Two more guys I want to mention. Taj Brooks, a veteran, a guy you are very high on, as am I, and you expect a lot from. And then a new guy, Steve Linton, an edge rusher who transferred from Syracuse this offseason, had a really good spring. You also have him very high on your list, and you're expecting big things from him. Can you give the people some notes on those two players?
Yeah, with Brooks, he's been a presence in this program since he's been here. Yeah. This is he'll be his senior year, and he's been I think a guy who's been steady, a guy who's been very reliable, a really solid interior runner. But I just get the impression that he's taken a step up.
Yeah. That
he's going to surprise some people. That he's just going to. I think he's really matured as a runner, and you're just going to see him really explode on the scene. With Texas Tech's offensive scheme, expecting anybody to rush for 1,000 yards is maybe pushing it a little bit, but he might get fairly close. And I would expect him to be netting well over 5 yards per carry, 5.2, 5.3. Nice. And he's going to be a real force. And, you got a really good guy behind him as well in Cameron Valdez.
Yes.
But still, I think that Taj is just so good that I had to put him up there. And with Linton, I'm just kind of taking a little bit of a flyer on him.
Yeah.
I mean, he did some good things at Syracuse, but he wasn't a regular starter there.
Yeah.
However, hearing it from you about the coaches and how they were raving about Steve Linton and what they're expecting out of him as a pass rusher, and then having seen it for myself in the spring game. I know it's just one scrimmage,
Sure.
all right, but hey, I mean, those two things together, what I saw, were enough to convince me that he's the real McCoy. I haven't seen anybody come off the line, off the edge for Texas Tech with that kind of explosion in a long time. He's just really going to be hard to handle. As long as he can play within himself and play discipline and not. Sometimes those very, very aggressive guys, you can get them to run themselves out of plays, overcommit and stuff like that. He's gonna, have to be sure to play with discipline. But if he can get that side of it down with his natural pass rushing ability, he's going to be in strong contention to lead the Big 12 in sacks, I believe. So you're talking about double digits in terms of stats. Sacks, excuse me. So, yeah, I mean, anytime you got somebody like that who can bring the heat in this day and age with the passing game, that's gold right there.
I agree. Mighty Joe, great stuff. I really appreciate your Critical 20 series every year. I look forward to it, and you crushed it again this year. For now, I want to thank you all for watching, and until next time.